3 weeks ago, I found a box in my grandmother's attic that shattered everything I believed about my childhood. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all from a woman I'd been told never to speak about. My Aunt Linda, the aunt who'd been erased from every family photo, every conversation, every memory. The letters were written from prison. 34 years of letters, all claiming the same impossible thing. That the man I called father, the decorated police officer, my hero, had destroyed her life to cover up his own crime. What I discovered in those letters would force me to make an impossible choice. Protect the family that raised me, or fight for the aunt I never knew existed. This is the story of how one dusty box in an attic unraveled 34 years of lies. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 36 years old, a pediatric nurse in Boston, and 3 weeks ago I discovered that my entire childhood was built on a lie. Not the small kind of lie that families tell to protect feelings. The kind that reshapes your entire understanding of who you are and where you came from. It started with a box in my grandmother's attic. She'd passed away 2 months earlier at 93, surrounded by family, peaceful in her sleep. While cleaning out her house, my mother asked me to sort through the attic, old photographs, vintage clothes, decades of accumulated memories. I found the box tucked behind a broken rocking chair, covered in dust. It was wooden, about the size of a shoebox, with a small brass lock that had rusted open years ago. Something told me to open it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to my grandmother, Dorothy Chun. All from the same person. The return address made my blood run cold. Linda Chun. Oregon State Correctional Facility. I sat down hard on the attic floor, my hands trembling. Linda Chun was my aunt, my mother's younger sister. The aunt I'd never met. The aunt my family never, ever talked about. Growing up, whenever I asked about her, the conversation would shut down immediately. She made bad choices. My mother would say, her voice tight. She's not part of our lives anymore. I'd always assumed she was estranged over some family drama. Maybe she'd stolen money. Maybe she'd been addicted to drugs. But I never imagined this. Prison. For what? And why had no one ever told me? My hands shaking, I opened the first letter. It was dated March 15, 1988, the year I was born. Dar mama. I know you don't want to hear from me. I know what everyone thinks. But I need you to know the truth, even if you never believe me. I didn't do what they say I did. I would never hurt a child. Never. Thomas Liet. He lied about everything. And now I'm sitting in a cell paying for his crimes while he walks free. The lawyer says my case is weak, because I have no proof. It's my word against his, and he's a decorated police officer. Who's going to believe a 22-year-old waitress over him? I think about Sarah every day. Is she walking yet? Does she smile? Does she ever ask about me? I know Elizabeth won't tell her the truth. She'll say I'm a monster. Maybe that's easier than explaining that her husband is. Please, Mama. Please believe me. I'm innocent. And I'm terrified of what Thomas might do next. Your daughter, Linda. I read it 3 times. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Elizabeth. That was my mother. Thomas. That was my father. The decorated police officer. The man who'd raised me. The man everyone respected. What had Linda been accused of? And what did she mean about my father lying? I grabbed another letter, this one from 1990. Dar mama. 2 years now. 2 years of appeals that go nowhere. 2 years of watching guilty people get released while I rot here for something I didn't do. The new lawyer says Thomas's testimony was too strong. He painted me as unstable, jealous, dangerous. He said I threatened Sarah. He said I tried to hurt her. None of it is true. You know me, Mama. You raised me. I would die before I'd hurt that baby. But Thomas knew exactly what to say to make everyone believe him. He's a master manipulator. He always has been. I know you visit Elizabeth. I know you see Sarah growing up. Does she look like me? Does she have the Chun eyes? Does Elizabeth ever mention me at all? Or have I been completely erased? I've accepted that I might die in here. But I need you to keep these letters. Someday, when Sarah is old enough, please give them to her. Please let her know that her Aunt Linda loved her. That I never wanted to be absent from her life. That I was stolen from her, not by choice. All my love, Linda. Tears were streaming down my face now. I looked at the dates on the remaining letters. They spanned decades. 1992, 1995, 2001, 2008, 2015, 2022. The last one was dated just 6 months before my grandmother died. I opened it with trembling hands. Dermanga. 34 years. I've been in here for 34 years for a crime I didn't commit. I'm 56 now. My health is failing. The doctors say my heart won't last much longer. All those years of stress, of anger, of grief, it's catching up. I've made peace with dying here. But I can't make peace with Sarah never knowing the truth. She's a grown woman now. She deserves to know what really happened. She deserves to know that the man she calls father destroyed my life to cover up his own sins. I found something, Mama. After all these years, I finally found proof. A former officer came forward. He's willing to testify about what Thomas really did, about how he framed me. My lawyer says it might be enough for an appeal. It might finally be enough. But I need Sarah to know the truth first. Before the appeals, before the media circus, before Thomas has a chance to spin another story. Please, Mama. If you love me at all, give her these letters. Let her decide who to believe. Your daughter, Linda. I sat in that dusty attic, surrounded by decades of hidden truth, and realized something terrifying. My grandmother had died before she could give me these letters. She kept them hidden, perhaps waiting for the right moment. But that moment never came. And now I was holding evidence that my father, the man I loved and trusted, might be the reason my aunt had spent 34 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit. I looked at my phone. It was 5:30 p.m. My parents were expecting me for dinner at 6. I had 30 minutes to decide. Do I confront them? Do I read all the letters first? Do I contact Linda's lawyer? Or do I pretend I never found this box? I didn't go to dinner that night. I called my mother from the attic, my voice shaking as I invented an excuse about a migraine. She believed me immediately, she always did. I'd never been a good liar, which made it easier when I told the truth. But tonight I was lying, and it felt like swallowing glass. After hanging up, I sat in that dusty attic until the sun went down, reading every single letter Linda had written over 34 years. By the time I finished the last one, it was nearly midnight, and my entire world had shifted on its axis. The letters painted a picture I couldn't ignore. In 1988, Linda was 22 years old, working as a waitress, and living with my grandmother while saving money for college. My parents, Thomas and Elizabeth, had just had me. My mother was struggling with severe postpartum depression, and Linda had stepped in to help. She'd been my primary caregiver for the first 3 months of my life while my mother recovered. According to Linda's letters, my father resented her presence. He didn't like having his sister-in-law in the house, didn't like that the baby responded better to Linda than to him, didn't like losing control of his household. They argued constantly. Linda wrote that Thomas had a temper, that he would explode over small things, that she'd seen him grab my mother's arm hard enough to leave bruises. Then, one night in November 1988, something happened. Linda's letters were frustratingly vague about the details, but the outcome was clear. I was found with a suspicious injury, a fracture in my arm that doctors said was consistent with abuse. Thomas immediately blamed Linda. He said he'd come home from work to find me crying, Linda acting strange, and my arm at an unnatural angle. He claimed Linda had confessed to him in private that she'd dropped me in a moment of exhaustion and panic. Linda's version was completely different. She said Thomas had been alone with me that afternoon while she ran to the grocery store. When she returned, I was screaming, and Thomas was pacing frantically. He told her I'd fallen from the changing table while he stepped away for just a second. He begged her not to tell anyone, said it would ruin his career as a police officer, said he'd never forgive himself. Linda, young and scared, agreed to keep it quiet. But at the hospital, Thomas changed his story. He told the doctors Linda had been the one watching me. He told them she'd been acting erratically, that she'd been jealous of my mother's relationship with me, that he'd suspected something was wrong but couldn't prove it. He said that when he confronted her, she'd broken down and admitted dropping me. With no witnesses and Thomas's word as a decorated officer carrying immense weight, Linda was arrested. My mother, still deep in the fog of postpartum depression, and completely dependent on Thomas, believed him. Or claimed to. The letters suggested my grandmother had doubts, but she'd been pressured by Thomas to stay silent. If you defend Linda, you'll lose Elizabeth too, he'd apparently told her. And you'll lose access to Sarah. Is that what you want? So my grandmother stayed quiet, visited me regularly, and collected Linda's letters in secret. The final letter mentioned the former officer willing to testify. His name was Detective Raymond Price. Linda wrote that Raymond had worked with Thomas in 1988 and had always felt something was off about the case. Years later, after retiring, Raymond heard rumors that Thomas had a pattern of domestic violence. Other incidents, other accusations that mysteriously disappeared. Raymond started digging and discovered inconsistencies in Thomas's original testimony. He was now willing to go on record. I sat in the darkness of the attic, my phone in my hand, and made a decision. I Googled Linda Chen Oregon lawyer appeal. The search returned dozens of results, but one name kept appearing. Jennifer Walsh, a defense attorney specializing in wrongful convictions. I found her office number and saved it in my phone. Then I took photos of every single letter, uploading them to a secure cloud folder. Evidence. Just in case. Finally, at 12:45 in the morning, I climbed down from the attic, the wooden box tucked under my arm. I drove home in silence, my mind racing. When I walked into my apartment, I looked at the framed photo on my bookshelf. Me and my father at my nursing school graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling. The man in that photo had raised me, taught me to ride a bike, walked me down the aisle at my wedding, held my hand when my marriage fell apart 2 years later. He was my hero. But what if he was also a monster? I set the box on my kitchen table and made another decision. Tomorrow, I would call Jennifer Walsh. I would ask her about Linda's case, about the appeal, about Detective Raymond Price. And then, depending on what I learned, I would decide whether to visit my father, or whether to destroy him. Jennifer Walsh's office was nothing like I expected. I'd imagined something sleek and corporate, all glass and steel. Instead, I found myself in a converted brownstone in downtown Portland, Oregon. I'd driven 6 hours overnight, leaving Boston at 3 in the morning because I couldn't sleep, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except move forward. The receptionist, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, offered me coffee. My hands shook as I accepted the cup. I'd barely slept in 2 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Linda's handwriting. I didn't do what they say I did. I would never hurt a child. Ms. Mitchell. Jennifer Walsh appeared in the doorway. She was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with sharp features and an intensity that made me sit up straighter. Please come in. Her office was cluttered with case files, law books stacked on every surface. Photos on the wall showed her with various clients, all holding signs that read exonerated or free at last. I wondered if Linda would ever hold a sign like that. I got your email, Jennifer said, settling behind her desk. You're Linda Chen's niece, the baby from the case. Sarah Mitchell, I said. My voice sounded strange. I found letters. Dozens of them. She wrote to my grandmother for 34 years and I never knew. Jennifer's expression softened. Linda talks about you constantly. She's followed your entire life from prison. She knows you're a pediatric nurse. She knows about your divorce. She's incredibly proud of you. Tears stung my eyes. She knows about me? Your grandmother sent her photos, occasional updates. Not often, but enough that Linda felt connected to you. Jennifer leaned forward. Sarah, I need to be honest with you. Linda's appeal is strong, but it's not guaranteed. Detective Raymond Price's testimony is compelling, but your father is still a respected former police officer. This won't be easy. Tell me what really happened, I said. The letters were vague about the details. What is my father accused of? Jennifer pulled out a thick file. In November 1988, you were 3 months old. Your mother was suffering from severe postpartum depression. Your father was under investigation at work. Internal Affairs suspected him of using excessive force during arrests. He was stressed, angry, and according to Raymond Price, drinking heavily. She paused, watching my reaction. I nodded for her to continue. On November 18th, Linda went to the grocery store, leaving you alone with your father for approximately 45 minutes. When she returned, you were screaming. Your arm was broken, a spiral fracture consistent with twisting force. Your father claimed you'd fallen from the changing table, and Linda agreed to cover for him because he convinced her it was an accident. But it wasn't an accident, I whispered. Raymond Price believes your father intentionally hurt you during a rage episode. The injury pattern, the severity, it was more consistent with abuse than an accidental fall. But at the hospital, your father panicked. He realized the doctors were suspicious, so he threw Linda under the bus. He claimed she'd been the one watching you, that she'd acted erratically, that she'd confessed to dropping you in a fit of jealousy. My stomach churned, and everyone believed him. He was a decorated police officer. She was a 22-year-old waitress with no criminal record, but also no credibility against his word. The jury convicted her of child abuse resulting in serious injury. She got 15 years, served 10, then violated parole by trying to contact your mother. They sent her back. She's been in and out ever since, mostly because she refuses to admit guilt. Admitting guilt would be the fastest path to parole, but Linda won't do it. Because she's innocent, I said. Yes. Jennifer's eyes met mine. But here's what I need you to understand, Sarah. If we move forward with this appeal, if Raymond testifies and the truth comes out, your father will likely face criminal charges. Statute of limitations doesn't apply if we can prove he committed perjury. He could go to prison. Your family will be destroyed. Your mother will have to face what she either knew or refused to see. I thought about my mother, Elizabeth, the woman who'd raised me, who'd been there for every milestone. Had she known? Had she suspected? Or had she been another one of Thomas's victims, too broken and controlled to question him? There's something else, Jennifer said carefully. Linda's health is failing. She has congestive heart failure. If this appeal doesn't happen soon, she might die in prison. She's been incarcerated for 34 years for a crime she didn't commit. For protecting your father. For refusing to let him destroy your life the way he destroyed hers. The weight of it crashed over me. Linda had sacrificed everything to protect me, and I'd lived my entire life not knowing she existed. I want to see her, I said. I need to meet her. Jennifer nodded slowly. I'll arrange it. But Sarah, once you walk through those prison doors, there's no going back. You'll have to choose a side. I already have, I said. Oregon State Correctional Facility was a sprawling complex of gray concrete and razor wire, surrounded by flat barren land that seemed to stretch forever. I sat in my rental car in the visitor parking lot for 20 minutes, unable to move. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. Jennifer had arranged the visit for the following day. She'd called ahead, cleared everything with the prison administration, and warned Linda that I was coming. She cried for an hour, Jennifer had told me on the phone that morning. Happy tears. She never thought this day would come. I finally forced myself out of the car. The October wind cut through my jacket as I walked toward the entrance. Inside, the process was dehumanizing. ID check, metal detector, pat down, instructions delivered in monotone by guards who'd clearly repeated them thousands of times. No jewelry. No cell phone. No purses. Nothing that could be considered contraband. They led me through a series of locked doors, each one clanging shut behind me with a finality that made my chest tight. We entered a large visiting room with small tables bolted to the floor, plastic chairs, and fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out and sad. A few other visitors were already there, talking quietly with inmates in orange jumpsuits. Then I saw her. Linda Chan sat at a table in the corner, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the doorway. When our eyes met, she stood up so quickly she nearly knocked over her chair. The guard beside me gestured that I could approach. I tried to imagine this moment during the entire 6-hour drive from Portland. I'd rehearsed what I might say, how I might feel. But nothing prepared me for the reality of seeing her face. A face that looked so much like my own. The same dark eyes, the same high cheekbones, the same small scar above the left eyebrow that I'd inherited and never known where it came from. Sarah, she whispered. Her voice cracked. Oh my God. Sarah. I didn't plan to cry. I'd told myself I would be strong, composed, that I would ask questions and gather information. But the moment I reached the table, tears were streaming down my face. Linda was crying too, her whole body shaking. "Can I?" she started, then stopped. "Am I allowed to hug you?" I looked at the guard. He nodded once. Linda came around the table, and for the first time in my life, I hugged the woman who'd been erased from my existence. She was smaller than I expected, fragile, her bones sharp beneath her prison uniform. She smelled like institutional soap and something else, something that reminded me of my grandmother's house of home. "I can't believe you're here," Linda said, pulling back to look at my face. Her hands cupped my cheeks, tears still flowing. "I've dreamed of this for 34 years. 34 years. We sat down, neither of us able to speak for a long moment. I studied her face, the deep lines around her eyes, the gray streaking through her black hair, the exhaustion that seemed carved into her features. She was 56 but looked 70. "I read your letters," I finally managed. "All of them. Every single one you sent to Grandma." Linda's face crumpled. She kept them. I always hoped she would, but I was never sure. When she stopped responding 3 years ago, I thought. She covered her mouth with her hand. I thought she'd thrown them away. I thought I'd lost my last connection to the family. She didn't throw them away. She hid them. I think she was waiting for the right time to give them to me, but she died before she could. "Dorothy was always caught in the middle," Linda said softly. "Between me and Elizabeth. Between the truth and keeping peace. I never blamed her for choosing her other daughter. Elizabeth needed her more. Elizabeth was the one who stayed, who gave her a granddaughter she could actually see and hold." Did my mother know? The question burst out of me. Did she know what Dad really did? Linda was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. "I don't know," she finally said. "In the beginning, I don't think so. She was so sick after you were born, Sarah. The postpartum depression was severe. She barely knew what day it was. When Thomas told her I'd hurt you, she was too fragile to question it. She just believed him. And later?" I pressed. "When she got better?" Linda's jaw tightened. "I think she suspected. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere deep down. There were things that didn't add up. But by then, admitting the truth would mean admitting she'd let an innocent person go to prison. It would mean facing what Thomas was capable of. It would mean her entire marriage was built on a lie." She looked at me directly. "It's easier to keep believing a comfortable lie than to face a devastating truth." "I need to know everything," I said. "Every detail of what happened that day. Jennifer told me the basics, but I need to hear it from you. I need to understand." Linda took a deep breath. "Okay. But Sarah, once I tell you, you can't unhear it. Are you ready for that?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I was ready at all. Linda folded her hands on the table, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere past my shoulder, as if looking back into a memory she'd replayed 1,000 times. "November 18th, 1988, she began. "It was a Thursday. Cold, rainy. Your mom had been having a particularly bad week. She wouldn't get out of bed, wouldn't eat. The doctor had adjusted her medication, but it wasn't helping yet. I'd been staying with them for 3 months, basically raising you while Elizabeth recovered." She paused, her throat working as she swallowed hard. "Thomas hated it. Hated that I was there. Hated that you responded to me. Hated that Elizabeth depended on me more than him. He'd come home from work angry almost every night. I later found out he was under investigation, something about excessive force during an arrest. A suspect had ended up in the hospital with broken ribs. Internal affairs was breathing down his neck." I felt sick but stayed silent, letting her continue. "That morning we argued. He wanted me to leave, said Elizabeth was fine, that I was overstaying my welcome. I told him Elizabeth wasn't fine, that she could barely function. He got in my face, told me I was trying to replace him, that I was poisoning his wife against him. Then he left for work, slamming the door so hard the whole house shook." Linda's hands trembled slightly. A guard walked by, glancing at us, then moving on. "Around 2 in the afternoon we ran out of formula. Elizabeth was sleeping and you were napping. I thought I had time to run to the store and back before you woke up. It was only 15 minutes away. I asked Thomas's brother Mike, who was visiting, to watch you. But right as I was leaving, Mike got an emergency call about his own kid being sick at school. He had to go. Thomas called from work, said he was on his lunch break and could come home to watch you for 45 minutes. Her voice dropped lower. I should have stayed. I should have just skipped the formula, let you cry when you woke up hungry. But I was 22 and stupid, and Thomas was your father. I thought you'd be safe with him for less than an hour. Linda, I said softly. What happened? When I got back, I heard you screaming from the driveway. Not normal crying, screaming like you were in agony. I ran inside and found Thomas in the nursery, pacing back and forth, wild-eyed. You were in the crib, your face purple from crying, your little arm bent at a wrong angle. I pressed my hand against my mouth. I picked you up and you screamed even louder. Thomas was babbling. She fell. She just fell. I turned around for 1 second and she rolled off the changing table. But Sarah, you couldn't roll yet. You were 3 months old. You could barely lift your head. What did you do? I told him we needed to go to the hospital immediately. He grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise and said, No, no hospitals. They'll ask questions. They'll think I did something. I could lose my job. He begged me to wait, to see if you'd calm down, to give you baby Tylenol and hope the swelling went down. Linda's eyes filled with tears. I told him he was insane. I told him you needed a doctor. He broke down crying, said it was an accident, that he'd gotten frustrated because you wouldn't stop crying, that he'd picked you up too roughly and your arm just twisted. He said he was sorry, that he'd never forgive himself, that if I took you to the hospital, his career would be over and Elizabeth would never forgive him. But you took me anyway. I took you anyway, she confirmed. I told him I didn't care about his career, that you mattered more. I grabbed my keys and drove you to the emergency room myself. He followed in his patrol car. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. At the hospital, while the doctors were examining you, Thomas pulled me aside. He said we needed to get our story straight. I told him there was no our story. There was only the truth. He said if I told them what really happened, Child Protective Services would take you away, Elizabeth would be destroyed, and the family would fall apart. He said if I loved you, I'd protect the family. So what did you tell the doctors? I told them the truth, Linda said firmly. I told them Thomas had been alone with you and that you'd been injured on his watch. I told them about his temper, about the argument that morning. I thought they'd believe me. I thought the truth would be enough. Her voice turned bitter. But then Thomas told them his version. And suddenly I was the unstable one. I was the jealous aunt. I was the one who'd confessed to hurting you. By the time the police arrived to take my statement, Thomas had already poisoned the well. No one believed me. Not the doctors. Not the doctors. Not the police. Not even my own sister. Why didn't my mother believe you? Linda's smile was sad and broken. Because believing me would mean accepting that the man she married, the father of her child, was capable of hurting a helpless baby. And that was more than she could bear. We sat in silence for several minutes. Around us, other inmates and their visitors talked in low voices, but I barely heard them. I was trapped in 1988, watching a young woman's life get destroyed while trying to protect a baby, trying to protect me. The trial was a nightmare, Linda finally continued. Thomas's lawyer painted me as an obsessed, unstable woman who resented your mother's happiness. They brought in a psychologist who testified that caretaker jealousy was a real phenomenon, that I fit the profile perfectly. Young, unmarried, no children of my own, living in someone else's home, caring for someone else's baby. That's ridiculous, I said. It worked though. Thomas testified that he'd come home to find you crying and me acting strange. He said when he examined you, I broke down and admitted I dropped you while changing your diaper. He said I begged him not to tell anyone, that I was terrified of going to jail. He painted himself as a conflicted father torn between protecting his sister-in-law and protecting his daughter. Linda's laugh was hollow. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced me to 15 years. I was 23 years old and my life was over. I'm so sorry, I whispered. The words felt pathetically inadequate. I thought Elizabeth would visit me. At least once. At least to let me explain, to hear my side without Thomas controlling the narrative. But she never came. For the first 5 years I heard nothing from her. Then Mama started visiting, bringing photos of you. She never said she believed me. But the fact that she came at all meant something. Did Grandma believe you? Linda considered the question carefully. I think she wanted to. But Thomas threatened her, said if she supported me, he'd cut off her access to you and Elizabeth. So she stayed neutral. She visited me in secret, brought me photos, let me know you were safe and growing up healthy. It was something. It had to be enough. I thought about my grandmother, about the impossible position she'd been in, choosing between two daughters, between the truth and her family staying intact. What about Detective Raymond Price? I asked. Jennifer said he has new evidence. Linda's expression shifted, a flicker of hope crossing her face. Raymond worked with Thomas in 1988. He was younger then, less experienced, and Thomas was his training officer. Raymond always felt something was off about the case, but he didn't question it at the time. You don't question a decorated officer when you're trying to build your own career. She leaned forward slightly. After Raymond retired 5 years ago, he started hearing rumors. Other officers talking about Thomas, about complaints that mysteriously disappeared, about domestic disturbance calls to your house that were never officially filed. Raymond started digging through old records, and he found inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? The timeline mostly. Thomas claimed he arrived home at 2:15 p.m. and found you already injured. But Raymond found Thomas's patrol car GPS logs from that day. Thomas clocked out at 1:30 p.m. and arrived at your house at 1:45 p.m. I didn't leave for the store until 2 p.m. And the grocery store cameras show me checking out at 2:23 p.m. Which means Thomas was alone with you for at least 30 minutes. Not the 5 minutes he claimed. My heart was pounding. Why didn't this come out during the trial? Because Thomas altered the records. He had access, he had the authority, and no one thought to question him. But Raymond found the original dispatch logs in an archive database that Thomas didn't know existed. The timestamps don't match Thomas's testimony. That's huge, I said. That proves he lied. It's not a smoking gun, Linda cautioned. But combined with Raymond's testimony about Thomas's pattern of violence, about the complaints that disappeared, about the culture of protecting bad cops, it might be enough. Jennifer thinks we have a real chance. I stared at my aunt, this woman who'd been buried alive for 34 years, and felt rage building in my chest. Not just at my father, but at everyone who'd let this happen. The system that believed a cop over a waitress. The family that chose comfort over truth. The mother who'd stayed silent. I need to confront him, I said. I need to hear him say it to my face. Linda grabbed my hand across the table, her grip surprisingly strong. Sarah, no. Thomas is dangerous. If he thinks you know the truth, if he thinks you're a threat. What? What will he do? I'm his daughter. I'm not a baby he can hurt anymore. You don't understand, Linda said urgently. Men like Thomas don't just admit defeat. They double down. They manipulate. They destroy anyone who threatens them. If you confront him before Jennifer files the appeal, he'll have time to prepare, to create a counter-narrative, to turn your mother and the rest of the family against you. Maybe they should be against me if they're on his side, I said bitterly. Sarah, please. Listen to me. Let Jennifer handle this through legal channels. Let Raymond testify. Let the evidence speak. Don't put yourself in Thomas's crosshairs. But I was already shaking my head, because sitting in that prison, looking at what my father had done to an innocent woman, I realized something. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to wait for lawyers and appeals and a system that had already failed Linda once. I was going to face Thomas Mitchell myself. And I was going to make him tell me the truth. I drove back to Boston that night, my mind racing faster than the car. It was a 6-hour drive, but I barely registered the miles passing. Linda's warnings echoed in my head, but so did her tears, her trembling hands, her face aged beyond its years by a prison cell she never deserved. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, it was 3 a.m. I hadn't called my father, hadn't warned him I was coming. I needed the element of surprise. I slept for 4 hours, then woke with absolute clarity. I showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater, nothing that would make me look like I was trying too hard, and drove to my parents' house in the suburbs. The same house I'd grown up in. The same house where everything had happened 36 years ago. My mother's car was gone from the driveway. She volunteered at the library on Saturday mornings. I timed this intentionally. This conversation needed to happen with just my father and me. I used my key to let myself in. The house smelled like coffee and the lavender air freshener my mother loved. Everything looked exactly as it always had. Family photos on the walls, my father's police commendations displayed in the hallway, comfortable furniture arranged around a fireplace that hadn't been lit in years. "Elizabeth? Is that you?" My father's voice came from the kitchen. "You forget something?" I walked through the living room and found him standing at the counter in sweatpants and a faded Boston PD t-shirt, pouring coffee. When he saw me, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Sarah, sweetheart, what a nice surprise." He set down the coffee pot and came toward me with open arms. "Your mom's at the library, but she'll be back in. I need to talk to you," I said, not moving toward him. "About Linda." He stopped mid-step. The smile didn't leave his face immediately, but something shifted behind his eyes. Calculation. A wariness. "Linda." He said the name like it was foreign. "Honey, why are you bringing up?" "I found letters," I interrupted. "Dozens of them. She wrote to Grandma for 34 years, and I read every single one." The smile disappeared completely. My father's jaw tightened, and for just a moment, I saw something cross his face that made my blood run cold. Anger. Raw and immediate. But he controlled it quickly, smoothing his expression into concerned confusion. "Sarah, sweetheart, sit down. Let me explain something to you." He gestured toward the kitchen table. "Your Aunt Linda is a very troubled woman. She's manipulative. She's been trying to rewrite history for decades." "I met her," I said. "Yesterday. I drove to Oregon and sat with her for 2 hours. I looked her in the eyes, Dad. And I believe her." The silence that followed was deafening. My father stood frozen, his coffee forgotten on the counter. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Harder. "You went to see her. It wasn't a question. You went behind our backs to visit a convicted felon who hurt you as a baby." "She didn't hurt me," I said, my voice steady despite my hammering heart. "You did." "That's insane." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sarah, she's gotten into your head. This is exactly what she does. She lies, she manipulates, she plays the victim. The courts proved she was guilty. A jury of her peers convicted her. Detective Raymond Price has evidence that you lied," I said. "GPS logs that prove you were alone with me for 30 minutes, not 5. Dispatch records you thought you'd erased. He's willing to testify." My father's face went pale, then flushed red. "Raymond Price is a washed-up drunk with an axe to grind. He got passed over for promotion 3 times and blamed me for it. Whatever he's told you is lies." "Then explain the GPS logs." "Explain," he sputtered. "I don't have to explain anything to you. I'm your father. I raised you. I loved you. And you're going to believe some convict over me?" "Yes," I said simply. "I am." Something broke in his expression then. The mask of concerned father slipped completely, and what lay beneath was ugly. He stepped toward me and instinctively I stepped back. "You have no idea what you're doing," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you're helping her? You're destroying this family. Your mother will never forgive you. Your aunts, your uncles, everyone who knows us, they'll think you've lost your mind. Or they'll think you're a liar who let an innocent woman rot in prison for 34 years. He moved faster than I expected, closing the distance between us. He didn't touch me, but he stood close enough that I could feel his breath, could see the veins standing out on his neck. "Listen to me very carefully," he said. "If you pursue this, if you help Linda's lawyer, if you testify or provide any evidence, I will make sure everyone knows you're unstable, that you've had a breakdown. Your mother will back me up because she has to, because the alternative destroys her too." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." His eyes were cold. "I've spent 36 years building a life, a reputation. I'm not letting my ungrateful daughter tear it down because she read some letters and got emotional." I looked at this man, this stranger wearing my father's face, and felt something inside me harden into steel. "I'm testifying," I said. "Jennifer Walsh is filing the appeal next week, and I'm going to tell them everything Linda told me. I'm going to support her with every resource I have." "Then you're not my daughter anymore." Good, I said. Because I don't want a father who's a monster. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard him say one more thing, his voice shaking with rage. You'll regret this, Sarah. I promise you that. I left without looking back. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Within 24 hours of my confrontation with my father, my phone exploded with messages. My mother called 17 times. I ignored every call. But I listened to the voicemails. The first one was confused. Sarah, your father said you had some kind of episode. Please call me back. I'm worried about you. By the fifth voicemail, confusion had turned to anger. How could you do this to us? After everything we've given you? After everything we've sacrificed? You're believing a criminal over your own father. The 10th voicemail was my mother crying. Please, Sarah. Please don't do this. You're tearing apart our family. Don't you understand what this will do to us? To our reputation? Everyone will think we're monsters. I deleted them all. My Aunt Carol called next, my mother's older sister. Sarah, honey, your parents are beside themselves. Whatever Linda told you, she's lying. She was always jealous of your mother, always causing problems. You need to stop this nonsense before you destroy everything. Then my cousin Jennifer. I can't believe you're doing this. Uncle Thomas is a hero. He served this community for 30 years. And you're going to ruin him over some letters from a convict? What's wrong with you? One by one, family members called or texted. Some were angry. Some were concerned. None of them believed me. They'd all bought into the story my father had carefully constructed over 3 decades. The story of the dangerous, jealous aunt and the heroic father who'd protected his family. Only one person reached out with support. My cousin David, Carol's son, who'd always been the black sheep of the family. His text was simple. I always thought something was off about Uncle Thomas. If you need anything, I'm here. It was the only message I answered. Thank you. That means more than you know. 3 days after my confrontation, Jennifer Walsh called. The appeal has been filed. Judge Morrison has agreed to hear new evidence. We have a court date in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, I repeated. My hands were shaking. Sarah, I need to prepare you for what's coming. Your father's lawyer has already filed a motion to dismiss. They're arguing that Raymond's evidence is circumstantial, that the GPS logs could have been tampered with, that this is just a desperate attempt by a convicted felon to overturn a just sentence. But that's not true. I know, Jennifer interrupted gently, but they're going to fight dirty. They're already spreading rumors that you're having a mental health crisis, that you're unreliable, that your testimony is compromised by emotional instability. Your father is a decorated former police officer. The system protects people like him. I closed my eyes. So what do? We build an airtight case. Raymond's testimony is strong, but we need more. I'm interviewing other officers who worked with Thomas, looking for patterns. I'm reviewing old domestic disturbance calls to your house that were never officially documented. And I need you to testify about your conversation with him. He threatened me, I said. He told me he'd make everyone think I was crazy if I pursued this. That's good. That shows consciousness of guilt. Can you remember his exact words? I recounted the entire conversation, every threat, every moment his mask had slipped. Jennifer took detailed notes. One more thing, she said. Your mother. Do you think there's any chance she'd testify? I thought about my mother's voicemails, her tears, her pleas to stop destroying the family. No. She'll stand by him. She has to. Admitting the truth means admitting she let an innocent woman go to prison. It means her whole marriage is a lie. I understand, Jennifer said quietly. But Sarah, you need to prepare yourself. When this goes to court, your entire family will likely testify against you. They'll paint you as unstable, as manipulated by Linda. It's going to be brutal. I know, I said. But I can't back down now. Linda's been in prison for 34 years. I've been lied to my entire life. Someone has to tell the truth, even if I'm the only one willing to do it. You're not alone, Jennifer said firmly. Linda's not alone anymore either. We're going to fight this together. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone. Another text had come through, this one from my mother. Your father had a heart attack this morning. He's in the hospital. I hope you're happy with what you've done. My hands trembled as I read it. Then I set the phone down and didn't respond. Because this wasn't my fault. And I wasn't going to let them make me believe it was. My father didn't die. The heart attack was mild. A warning, the doctor said. Stress-induced. When I heard the news from David, who'd visited the hospital, I felt nothing. No relief. No guilt. Just emptiness. Your mom's telling everyone it's your fault, David told me over coffee 3 days later. She's saying the stress of your accusations caused it. Of course she is, I said flatly. David studied me across the table. Are you okay? Really? No, I admitted. But I will be. Once this is over. The weeks leading up to the hearing were the longest of my life. I went to work, took care of patients, smiled when I needed to. But inside I was hollowed out. My family had made their choice and it wasn't me. Jennifer worked tirelessly building the case. She found 2 other officers willing to testify about Thomas's temper, about complaints that mysteriously disappeared. She found hospital records showing my mother had been treated for suspicious injuries 3 times during their marriage. Injuries she claimed were accidents. She won't testify, I told Jennifer when she showed me the records. She'll deny everything. I know, Jennifer said. But the pattern speaks for itself. The day before the hearing, I visited Linda again. She looked different, hopeful, terrified, fragile. We sat across from each other in that same visiting room, holding hands across the table. Tomorrow changes everything, she whispered. One way or another. We're going to win, I said, trying to sound confident. Sarah, even if we don't, even if the judge denies the appeal, you've already given me something I never thought I'd have. Her eyes filled with tears. You believed me. After 34 years of everyone calling me a liar, my own niece looked at the evidence and chose truth over comfort. That means everything. We're going to win, I repeated, because I couldn't accept any other outcome. The courtroom was packed. I'd expected that, but seeing it was different. My mother sat in the front row behind my father's legal team. Her face a mask of grief and rage. She wouldn't look at me. My father sat at the defense table in a suit, looking frail and sympathetic. The heart attack had given him a physical vulnerability that played well for the cameras. Because there were cameras, the media had latched onto the story. Decorated officer faces new accusations in decades-old case. Niece turns against family to free convicted aunt. Linda was brought in wearing prison orange, her hands cuffed. When our eyes met, she gave me a small brave smile. Judge Morrison was a black woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the documents Jennifer had submitted, then looked up. This is a hearing to determine whether new evidence warrants reopening the case of Oregon versus Linda Chun. Ms. Walsh, you may begin. Jennifer stood, composed and confident. Your Honor, we will present evidence that Linda Chun was wrongfully convicted based on perjured testimony from Officer Thomas Mitchell. Detective Raymond Price will testify about falsified records. We have GPS logs proving Officer Mitchell's timeline was impossible. We have a pattern of domestic violence and evidence tampering that spans decades. My father's lawyer, a silver-haired man named Richard Brennan, stood immediately. Your Honor, this is a witch hunt orchestrated by a convicted child abuser and enabled by a niece experiencing a documented mental health crisis. The original conviction was sound. This is simply an attempt to relitigate a case that was settled 34 years ago. Documented mental health crisis? I whispered to Jennifer. They're using your divorce, the fact that you took a week off work. They're twisting everything, she whispered back. Judge Morrison's gaze swept the courtroom. I'll hear the evidence. Detective Price, please take the stand. Raymond Price was in his 70s now, gray-haired but steady. He was sworn in, and Jennifer began her questioning. Detective Price, you worked with Officer Thomas Mitchell in 1988. Can you describe your professional relationship? Thomas was my training officer, Raymond said, his voice clear. I respected him initially. But over time I saw things that concerned me. What kind of things? Excessive force, intimidation of suspects, reports that disappeared, and inconsistencies in the Linda Chun case that I was told not to question. My father's face remained neutral, but I saw his jaw clench. Tell us about those inconsistencies, Jennifer said. And Raymond did. He told the truth. All of it. For the first time in 34 years, someone with authority was calling my father a liar. And the whole world was listening. Raymond Price's testimony lasted 2 hours. He methodically laid out the evidence, the GPS logs, the falsified reports, the pattern of complaints that vanished. My father's lawyer tried to discredit him, painting him as bitter and resentful, but Raymond remained calm and factual. Then it was my turn to testify. I walked to the stand on shaking legs, acutely aware of my mother's eyes burning into my back. I was sworn in, placed my hand on the Bible, and promised to tell the truth. Jennifer approached gently. Ms. Mitchell, can you describe your relationship with your father growing up? He was my hero, I said honestly. He taught me to ride a bike, helped with homework, came to every school event. I loved him completely. And when did that change? 3 weeks ago, when I found my grandmother's letters and learned the truth about Linda. I recounted everything. Finding the box, reading the letters, visiting Linda, confronting my father. When I described his threats, his admission that he'd spent 36 years building a reputation, he wouldn't let me destroy, several people in the courtroom gasped. My father's lawyer cross-examined me aggressively. Ms. Mitchell, isn't it true you've been under significant stress? A divorce 2 years ago, depression, time off work. I took 3 days off for a stomach flu, I said evenly. And yes, divorce is stressful. But I'm not unstable and I'm not lying. Isn't it possible your aunt manipulated you? That she's a master at playing the victim. I'm a pediatric nurse, I said. I'm trained to identify abuse, to recognize when someone is lying. Linda isn't lying. My father is. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Order. After my testimony, Jennifer called a final witness, Dr. Patricia Nguyen, a forensic pediatrician who'd reviewed my medical records from 1988. The injury pattern is inconsistent with an accidental fall, Dr. Nguyen testified. The spiral fracture in the infant's arm is characteristic of a twisting motion, typically seen in cases of intentional harm. A fall from a changing table would produce different injuries. My father's lawyer tried to discredit her too, but the damage was done. Finally, Linda herself took the stand. She was nervous, her voice shaking, but she told her story with quiet dignity. She looked directly at the judge. I've spent 34 years in prison for protecting a baby I loved. I don't hate Thomas Mitchell, I pity him. But I won't die in this cage for his sins. I'm innocent. I've always been innocent. When all the testimony was finished, Judge Morrison called for a recess. I'll review the evidence and issue my ruling tomorrow at 10 a.m. That night I couldn't sleep. Jennifer had warned me that even with strong evidence, overturning a conviction was difficult. Judges were reluctant to admit the system had failed so catastrophically. The next morning, the courtroom was even more packed. News cameras lined the hallway. I sat directly behind Linda, close enough to touch her shoulder through the barrier. Judge Morrison entered, her expression unreadable. Everyone stood, then sat. I've reviewed the evidence presented in this hearing, she began. I've considered the original trial transcripts, the new GPS evidence, Detective Price's testimony, and Dr. Nguyen's expert analysis. The silence was suffocating. The evidence presented suggests a serious miscarriage of justice. The GPS logs directly contradict Officer Mitchell's sworn testimony. The pattern of evidence tampering is deeply concerning. The medical evidence supports Ms. Chen's account. My heart was hammering. Therefore, I am granting the motion. Linda Chen's conviction is overturned. Ms. Chen, you are hereby released from custody immediately. The state has 30 days to decide whether to retry the case or dismiss charges entirely. The courtroom exploded. Linda collapsed into sobs. Jennifer grabbed my hand. Behind me, I heard my mother scream, "No! No, this can't be happening." I turned to see my father, his face ashen, being approached by 2 officers. "Thomas Mitchell, you're under arrest for perjury and evidence tampering." As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me one final time. Not with anger. With something worse. Disbelief that his own daughter had destroyed him. I looked away. 2 hours later, I stood outside the prison as Linda walked through the gates a free woman for the first time in 34 years. She was 56 years old. She'd lost her entire adult life to my father's lies. She saw me waiting and ran. We collided in a fierce hug, both of us crying. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you for believing me. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth." "I'm sorry it took so long," I whispered. "I'm sorry you lost so much." "I didn't lose everything," she said, pulling back to look at my face. "I didn't lose you." My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "You've destroyed this family. I will never forgive you." I deleted it without responding, because I hadn't destroyed my family. I'd freed us from a lie. And sometimes the truth costs everything. But it's still worth it. Linda linked her arm through mine. "What now?" she asked. I looked at this woman, my aunt, my family, my friend, and smiled through my tears. Now we start over. Both of us. Together. And for the first time in 34 years, Linda Chan smiled in the sunlight.